something that Americans will have to endure. And they're enduring it because we're engaging in a war with Iran that Iran has engaged with us over the last 47 years. The American people know the kind of threat that Iran represents. They understand the degree to which Iran has spilled American blood over the last 50 years, continues to threaten Americans every day.
We are beating expectations on manufacturing. I want to talk about tariffs, the reindustrialization of this country, and the fact that we're bringing a lot of those supply chains back. That is going well.
In what sense?
Jobless
in
claims
what sense?
in
Because
manufacturing output.
Jobs
We are
were
net
basically
energy
flat for the entirety of 2025.
Yes, it takes
job
time.
Creation overall,
it takes time to build factories. It takes time for
job
tax
creation
incentives
overall
to go
for the
in.
entire
Jobless
economy
claims are the
also
lowest they've been in
basically
years.
flat.
In today's video, Abby Phillip destroys Noah Rothman and Peter Meijer on Newsnight with Abby Phillip as tensions rise over the Iran war, rising gas prices, and growing frustration from Americans. Abby Phillip pushes back as Noah Rothman and Peter Meijer try to justify the situation, but cracks begin to show with inconsistent messaging and unclear goals. As the debate heats up, the focus shifts to public opinion and the real economic impact, highlighting the gap between political claims and everyday reality. So let's dive in and watch how Abby Phillip shuts down Noah Rothman and Peter Meijer on Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
So do you think the American public wants us to support the democracy in Ukraine or our own national security?
Well, I think what Kamala Harris's point, even though she's not the president, was making is that if Ukraine's democracy falls, it does jeopardize our democracy.
And what if America's national security falls?
They were also arguing that if
the
America's national security would be
if I'm
stake for
understanding
Ukraine
your
as well.
point, I mean, is the argument that it's fine to ask Americans to suffer?
I don't think we're asking Americans to suffer. What Donald Trump did not say there, as you pointed out incorrectly, was that prices are not high. He said they're not as high as we unfortunately expected them to be, knowing we were going to strike Iran. Also, the comparison stands because we're still dealing with the cost of Ukraine. That war is still going on. This is the opposite of a never-ending war. It's a few weeks of strikes, which Donald Trump, more than anyone else, wants to end as soon as possible. And he's, I think, the only one with the record of proving that he actually can lower gas prices like nobody else.
Wait, so no. He did actually say in his administration has said several times, not only with tariffs, but now with gas prices, that yes, the American people should need to make sacrifices and they will feel that prices are increasing. And that has been his message. It was last year. They did not like it. You've seen his poll numbers go down. Democrats have been winning in special election after special election, and you're seeing him do it again, which I would say that probably the vast majority of Republican voters in swing districts don't agree with this message as a midterm message heading into the election this November. The other thing I'll say is, I'm sorry, Donald Trump has not pumped gas in 50 years. He has no idea how much.
He has ever pumped gas.
I'm not sure he has ever pumped gas. And I don't even actually know if anyone in his family has ever pumped gas at this point. But I will say he's not necessarily someone I would take advice on what Americans are feeling and whether or not prices are up. He bases everything on the stock market, and even then he paints a different picture. But yes, he's also saying that he has had the best economy since God knows when, which is also not true.
He said in his first term he had an incredible economy. That's not true. And it was.
Honestly,
it was an incredible economy.
And
he
prices
broke
also
records in that first
increased.
term.
And that's the first term. But in his first year,
but that's what he said. I'm just making sure we're accurate about what he said.
I wish I had heard the president say, as Sheetal said, that he's asking the American people. Sochi, I'm sorry. I apologize. Yeah. My fault. But I really wish I had heard him say, as you said, to the American people to bear this burden more, to enlist the American people in this national project, because it is something that Americans will have to endure. And they're enduring it because we're engaging in a war with Iran that Iran has engaged with us over the last 47 years. The American people know the kind of threat that Iran represents. They understand the degree to which Iran has spilled American blood over the last 50 years, continues to threaten Americans every day.
Looking at this exchange, what stands out is how disconnected some of the arguments are from what Americans are actually experiencing right now. Economic data shows that energy prices have a direct and immediate impact on inflation, especially in sectors like transportation and food. When gas prices rise, it doesn't just stay at the pump, it spreads across the entire economy. So framing this as a minor or temporary inconvenience overlooks how quickly those costs hit working families who are already dealing with tight budgets. Another thing that deserves more attention is how public opinion tends to shift when economic pressure builds. Polling trends over the years have consistently shown that Americans become far less supportive of foreign conflicts when they feel the financial strain at home. That's not about ignoring global threats. It's about prioritizing stability domestically. Even historically, prolonged conflicts tied to rising costs have led to political backlash, especially in swing districts where voters are more sensitive to economic changes and policy outcomes. At the same time, there's also the question of credibility when it comes to economic messaging. It's one thing to talk about macro indicators like the stock market, but that doesn't always reflect what people are dealing with day to day. Wage growth, cost of living, and purchasing power tell a very different story. So when leadership downplays those realities, it creates a gap between messaging and lived experience. And that gap can become a bigger issue than the policy itself, because people tend to trust what they feel over what they're told.
Our national security professionals are very good at interdicting that threat, but the threat is live all the time. And I think the American people would bear that burden if the president was a little bit more honest about it. He has been saying, yeah, it's a journey, it's a sojourn, it's a little excursion. That just minimizes the nature of the conflict. The nature of the conflict is epochal. We're not talking about November.
But
We're talking about the next 20 years.
They don't approve of it. They don't approve of the war, and that's what we're seeing in the polling.
So to Sochi's
Not to
point,
Republicans do.
they don't. Majority of Americans, a pretty large majority of Americans, don't approve of the war. The Atlantic had an interesting story today, quoting a Trump supporter, Thomas Montoya, who voted for Trump in 2024 and now is frustrated about where things stand. He says the president is bragging about the economy, even though everyone Montoya knows is hurting. He promised to stop wars, but started one in Iran. And here's what Montoya says. When Trump opens his mouth, 3/4 of what he says is stories, lies. He plans to vote in the midterm elections in the fall, but he may not choose a Republican. And CBS poll from just a couple days ago, April 8th to 10th, Trump's disapproval on the economy is at 65%. His disapproval on inflation is at 69%. It does not seem that Americans are willing to give him a buy on this because they think Iran is such an important threat that they're willing to sacrifice for it. They're just not.
No, and they're also hearing every single night how terrible things are. The sky is falling. The manufacturing reports that were released today from the Philadelphia Fed and yesterday, the Empire State reporting, we are beating expectations on manufacturing. I want to talk about tariffs, the reindustrialization of this country, and the fact that we're bringing a lot of those supply chains back. That is going well.
What sense?
Jobless
in
claims
what sense?
in
Because
manufacturing output.
Jobs
We are
were
a net
basically
energy
flat for the entirety of 2025.
Yes, it takes
job
time.
Creation overall,
it takes time to build factories. It takes time for
job
tax
creation
incentives
overall
to go
for the
in.
entire
Jobless
economy
claims are the
also
lowest they've been in
basically
years.
flat. We've heard consumer spending that Scott Bessent likes to talk about, but a lot of that is coming from people who are rich. Rich people are spending a lot of money right now. Poor people do not have a lot of money to spend. And so I think the point I'm trying to make is you can look at a lot of different statistics, but Americans are being crystal clear. They are not confident in this economy. And I think there's a lot of reason to suggest that the pain is not evenly distributed. And if the White House doesn't want to acknowledge that, they might be making a political mistake.
I mean, again, I'm getting back to jobless claims, manufacturing output, the fact that right now the U.S. has gone to a net exporter of petroleum for the first time since World War II. Our natural gas prices are at the lowest they've been in 3 months. They're at historic lows across the board. Meanwhile, in Europe, they've skyrocketed. And we are exporting more LNG than ever before. Thank God the Biden administration couldn't continue their idiotic pause on LNG export facility permitting. I'm saying, yes, I get it. Every night we're talking about gas prices are too high. They're 50 cents higher than they were 2 years ago. They're $1 lower than they were 4 years ago. They're too high. I hope they go down. They're trending down with where the oil futures are going and where we can expect them to be in the coming months. And the administration wants them to be there, too.
What really stands out in this discussion is the gap between macro-level statistics and what people are actually feeling day to day. You can point to things like energy exports or selective economic indicators, but consumer sentiment data has consistently shown that confidence drops when inflation sticks around, especially in essentials like food, rent, and transportation. Even if some indicators look stable on paper, purchasing power tells a different story, and that's usually what shapes public opinion more than headline numbers or optimistic projections. Another important factor here is how uneven the economic impact has been. Recent data trends have shown that higher income households are driving a large portion of consumer spending, while lower and middle income groups are cutting back due to rising costs. That creates a distorted picture of economic strength, because overall spending may look fine, but it's not evenly distributed. Historically, when economic gains are concentrated at the top, dissatisfaction grows, especially during periods of geopolitical tension, where people are being told to accept additional sacrifices. At the same time, public support for conflicts tends to depend heavily on trust and clarity from leadership. When messaging feels inconsistent or overly optimistic compared to lived experiences, support drops quickly. We've seen this pattern in past conflicts where initial justification didn't match long-term realities. So even if national security concerns are valid, the bigger issue is whether people believe the strategy is clear, necessary, and worth the cost. Without that trust, it becomes much harder to sustain both political and public support over time.
I think the thing is that Biden had 4 years. He made some promises on the economy. Voters did not like what he was able to deliver. And so Democrats lost. And the claim is, yes, they might not be as high as they were with Biden, but Americans are still not satisfied with where they are. And so you can quote statistics about all the gas and the petroleum, but if you don't feel it today, that statistic feels like you are living. You might as well be in the Artemis right now.
What is impacting how people feel? It's what they watch on TV.
No. What is impacting? No.
That's what literally. I mean, that's like, literally what the Biden people said, and
what
they were
people
wrong.
feel is when they go.
You know, they were wrong.
No, but they were wrong when gas prices were about $5. They said it was transitory. They would get back to normal.
Yes, and they were wrong.
Because there were statistics that supported their view. GDP growth, our relative position to the rest of the world, you could argue all of those things. They were right. There were statistics that showed that our inflation was lower than the rest of the world, that we were relatively doing better than Europe and the rest of the world. They could point to statistics all day, but that ain't going to cut it when Americans are saying that's not how we
What were Democrats asking us to sacrifice for in the Biden years? I mean, the notion here that this, you played that congresswoman who's all of a sudden very concerned with profligacy. Give me a break. What were they asking us to sacrifice for and inflate the economy? It was build back better. It was healthcare. It was domestic spending. All of this goes into the gaping maw of American entitlements that are utterly insatiable. This is a project to advance American freedom and national
You're talking about, you're characterizing domestic spending as the gaping maw of entitlement programs. But a lot of Americans see that as where our money should be going.
Yes.
Just to be clear.
It is where our money is going. It's where the vast majority of it goes.
But many people, I think you just have to acknowledge that there are a lot of, for you, foreign wars are super important. But for a lot of Americans, and when you look at the polling, a lot of Americans say, actually, we want fewer of those. We want more spending at home. And that's actually what Donald Trump ran on. That's why this man, Thomas Montoya, is saying, so upset.
Just to respond briefly.
I don't think you're wrong. I'm not using Biden as a comparison point to say, let's do what Biden did. That's what I'm trying to get you all to realize is I'm giving Republicans free advice for an era that I just lived through for the last 4 years, right? I sat on this set and gave statistics, and Americans were saying, no, no, no. And now you all are just switching the seat. What I'm saying, I think that right now, Americans are frustrated with where prices are, and they're blaming that on Republicans. Now, the issue will Democrats present a winning case on what they can do better? Now, if they go backwards, I won't think they will.
There's another side to this polling, very briefly. Everybody's against the war, right? But if you go to the CBS News polling and you look at YouGov, CBS, and they say what they want from this war, and it's an 80-20 proposition. They want freedom in Iran. They want Iran to stop threatening its neighbors. They want its nuclear program decimated. They want all these things from the war. They're skeptical we might get it, but they're not wholesale against the notion that we should defang Iran.
I agree with that,
Stepping back from the exchange, the disconnect between statistical arguments and lived reality. You can cite GDP growth, relative inflation compared to Europe, or energy production numbers, but none of that matters if people feel squeezed every time they go to the grocery store or fill up their tank. Consumer sentiment indexes have repeatedly shown that perception often lags behind official data, and when essentials remain expensive, people don't feel like the economy is improving, regardless of what broader indicators suggest. Another layer here is how priorities shift when economic pressure builds. Polling over the years has consistently shown that Americans become less supportive of foreign conflicts when domestic costs rise. It's not that people suddenly ignore global threats, it's that they expect a clearer connection between sacrifice and outcome. When that connection isn't obvious, frustration grows. That's especially true when voters feel like promises about avoiding prolonged conflicts or improving economic conditions aren't lining up with what they're experiencing in real time. At the same time, there's also a difference between agreeing on goals and trusting the strategy to achieve them. Most Americans can agree on broad objectives like reducing threats or preventing nuclear escalation, but that doesn't automatically translate into support for how those goals are pursued. History shows that public backing depends heavily on transparency, consistency, and results. Without those, even well-intentioned policies can lose support quickly. So the real issue isn't just what the goal is, it's whether people believe the current approach is actually capable of delivering it. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.